When you work behind the scenes, let me see if I
It's good.
I think we're ready to move on to the next three sections, which we are calling the auxiliary outcomes, which, as Madeline said, the first three are the core outcomes. That's what your agency will be assessed, our progress or lack of progress will be assessed on those three. That's not to say that these last three are not important. You are expected to complete all of them. It's just that your agency will not be evaluated based on the outcomes of these last three. Okay. In employment, as you see, we've got number one, unemployed, being the most serious, if the child is old enough to work. If the child is not old enough to work, in these three, you have the not applicable category. Now, some of these will be not applicable on many of your kids. The child's not old enough to work, it's not feasible for them to work, then you would use the not applicable in this case. Otherwise, you would answer it the best you can. You look at all those categories. Does anyone have any questions on any of the 1 through 6 on employment? If you put not applicable, you are required to put a reason why. Okay. And that one really has not changed from the old form. On the use of alcohol or other illegal substances, the substance abuse section, we have made several changes to the wording on this, just to make it a little more clear on what each of them are. Number one, what we consider to be the most serious, acknowledges currently addicted to alcohol or other substance. And that means daily use or needs to use to feel normal. Is that clear to everyone?
The key language that we had in these were that they acknowledge, so this is what we're not saying. That can help you validate your information, because you're not being asked to say, this is absolutely true. This is what the youth acknowledges that they are using at this level. So that helps you to feel like you're reporting accurately, or that you're not reporting something that's not true. Does that make sense?
Because the only way to truly verify it would be a drug screen.
Right.
And then not everybody does that, so just.
Especially if that's not why
family
they're
knowledge.
receiving services from them.
And again, this is probably where we made the most changes, was to this section, because of the type of language. Number 2, admits to use of alcohol or other substances regularly, which we mean by regularly, we mean 2 to 3 times weekly, or they test positive for drugs or alcohol in the last 30 days. 3, reports using alcohol or other substances occasionally, and that's monthly or less in social settings. Reports abstaining totally, reports being exposed but no use. They've been exposed but they have not used, which we consider to be pretty good, very good. And then the last one, no exposure whatsoever. And like I said, not applicable on each of these. If they do not apply, you must put a reason why. Any questions on the substance abuse issue section?
I would just really encourage, I know that a lot of you guys do not provide substance abuse treatment in your agency. Some of your youth may be getting this through other agencies, or they may not be getting it at all. I would still encourage you to use this section, to have your staff complete this section for every kid, because we need to be assessing the need for it. This isn't perfect, but I think that it's as pretty much as good as we can expect for now. We'll see how it works, because this is relying on the youth reporting this behavior. Hopefully, you guys, your staff, are developing enough of a relationship with the youth that they will admit to using this, even if you don't have a test. Now, I can imagine circumstances where maybe the guardian or the parent is saying he's coming home drunk 3 nights a week, but the kid is just adamant that I never drink, I never use anything. You're going to report this based on what the kid is saying But hopefully you're following that up. If it's within the scope of your services, you're following that up with some kind of, you know, enhanced testing or monitoring or something to try to show, even if it means that you're not showing improvement in that area, what you're doing is you're showing need in that area, and that's just as important.
Again, even though it says auxiliary, we expect each of these sections to be filled out, whether you provide that service or not. Okay, moving on to behavioral health. Made a few changes here. Number one, living in a community without mental health services with major conflict. We consider that to be fairly serious because it probably indicates that they need mental health services.
That's all.
Currently hospitalized or in residential treatment for a mental health condition, living in the community in day treatment or in outpatient services with major conflict, and the same, minimal to no conflict, living in the community without mental health services with minimal conflict and no mental health diagnosis or services prescribed or observed as needed. That's the one that we added that I think is vital because many of the kids don't have a mental health diagnosis, a need for it. Yes, Bonnie?
Okay, if we get a referral of a youth who's in detention, he's been getting outpatient services somewhere, but he's in detention now. So do you put living in the community, in day treatment or outpatient services with major conflict? Do we put 3? He's in the detention facility, but
In
he's
these,
been in the,
in these sections, it's either at current status or within the last 30 days. So what I would do is put what it was just before he was arrested.
Well, and it would be reflected in 2 different sections of,
Right, justice.
of the family situation. But also, I would indicate that that's major conflict because it's requiring detention.
Right.
Whether that's related to the mental health diagnosis or not, separate. But that's going to be reflected in 2 different sections.
but all of these are within the last 30 days.
Correct.
Sure, we read that.
Any other questions on the behavioral health section? Or any of the 3 auxiliary outcomes? All I'm saying, you are expected to fill them out.
Please encourage your staff, even if it's not applicable, don't just skip the section marked not applicable and the reason, because we need to know. It's going to show up if it's not filled out at all as a strike, for lack of a better word, a strike against you. I mean, it should be filled out for everyone. So be sure that it is being filled out for everyone.
I also have in the overall guidance, Madeline has gone over most of that. As you know, it's a numerical system, number 1 being the most serious. The idea is, as the child progresses through your system, through your services, they will go from a number 1 to a little bit higher. That's the ideal. That's what it's set up to show. Hopefully, in many of the cases, it will show that. You will enter these into Right Track, and you are expected to retain a hard copy of this form that you have completed in your client file for review purposes later on. It is, we are supposed to have the capability of printing it out once it's entered in Right Track. So you can either use your handwritten form or the printed out one. This verification that you've done it.
Can it be scanned into our electronic medical records, or does it have to be the actual hard copy?
DYS? I don't know.
Say that again, Ashley.
We have electronic medical records, so we don't necessarily keep a paper chart on anything unless it's required. So we would scan it and then shred it.
Right.
It would be in our electronic medical records that could be printed out at any time.
Sure.
Does
However
that
you
meet
keep
the
your records.
criteria?
Yeah. However you keep your records is how it should be kept.
It should be able to be verified if a monitor comes.
Right, it would just be in that.
That's what you
electronic
need to be
medical record
concerned
chart.
about.
Yeah.
That-
And that sounds consistent with any record that you guys would
Right,
have.
right, right.
Okay, I think that's all of my section. If we have no questions.
And just to point out, at the end of this section, that hopefully these are going to be available for you to view either by going to the DYS website and following a link to another site, or we're going to send everyone a CD, DVD with the video.
Yes, the training, we're gonna provide that to each of you, so that you can share it with your staff.
I don't know.
I'm gonna send it out by email, because I'm not sure. Or maybe.
Hey, I can tell you guys are hungry, and I agreed to be very, very brief. I may not be as brief as Janice. And then I just want to emphasize that for me, that the intent, my involvement in this is to improve partnership between DYS's community-based provider system and DYS. That what I know, I get a chance not only to deal directly with the kids that are in the system involved, but each of you and all the system players. I've sat in several different legislative hearings, and the data that gets reported to the legislature are the less than 5% of kids that are committed to DYS, because that data has been very easy to collect and report. And if I know for a fact that you guys are making a huge difference in keeping kids from entering the juvenile justice system and also preventing them from entering DYS's residential ops. So the purpose of this is for DYS to help collect and report data to the folks that need to be concerned about how we fund these issues and what we do on behalf of kids. I want to take personal privilege to thank Madeline Keith and Janice Justice, because they've been at the forefront of this for several years. It's been critical. We all need to daily, we do it anyway, but a particular prayer for Melissa Nichols' well-being.
15 more months.
She is using the R word, but Melissa is very integral and very essential in helping tame right track and tame databases, and that's essential. She has been a partner in this. And then Carmen Mosley Sims, who's just arrived, she's been a part of the system for a number of years in a separate role. She showed up as the assistant director and said, by golly, let's make this happen. Because most of you are aware that part of this process began in July 2011. It was very broad, it was very spooky, it was very scary. Your staff were involved in trying to capture stuff. And that Madeline and Janice said, we got to make sense of this. And so that has continued. Carmen's leadership helped make this event today possible. And part of the missing ingredient was for all of us getting in the same room at the same time and having this dialogue, having this conversation. Because what's most critical is that we're all moving forward on the same page. Today is how we're doing that. And that we admit that this form is not perfect, the process is not perfect, nor is our union. We're moving toward a more perfect union. And so that the feedback that you guys provide, not only today, but throughout this process, Carmen's agreed to set up, you heard her say, send me all the emails you care to, and she'll get to it, she'll respond. And that Melissa also needs the assistance of saying, this is what we need to do. Because some of this in helping improve DYS's database may take some resource, which is the fancy word for money, but that's critical and that's really important. But getting all of you guys consistently reporting data helps push that momentum that much further. So thank you for being here. And since we are heading to lunch, my role is to offer some definitions. Madeline has discussed a lot of these, but as you're filling out the forms asking about education, one of the questions that we need to discuss as a crew is, what about those critters that are being homeschooled? What do you guys think? How do they fall in that category? Are they homeschool, private school, alternative learning environment? How do you guys want to capture homeschooling? Alternative learning environment? Okay. That becomes the definition, alternative learning environment. Homeschooling, or most of our kids, or at least most of the kids near here in my heart, are in the alternative school anyway. But if you've got a family that's capable and competent and they've gone through the right processes and superintendents blessed it and it's kind of legitimate, then let's call it alternative learning environment. One of my favorite judges in our system, Wade A. Ranton Jr., the parents that appeared before him said, I want to homeschool my child. He says, more power to you. 8 to 3, they're in the public school. After 3 o'clock, you want to homeschool them all you want to. God bless you. But as we define educational vocational programs, that we're talking about some legitimate institutions. Most of our kids are going to be in the public school setting, K through 12, hopefully 12. Unfortunately, we appear to be detaining some Ks, but you guys hopefully aren't serving those youngsters. But that whole continuum, pretty self-explanatory. Concerns, questions? We get confusion on expulsion. That there's expulsion and there's suspension. Expulsion means that the behavior has resulted in an infraction where the school district says, you ain't coming back this school year, this calendar year, until you come back, usually before the school board or a school hearing officer, to say you done learned your lesson and you can come back and you can learn and you're going to behave. So expulsion is a formal process, not to be confused with suspension. A lot of our kids get suspended. Sometimes it's out of school, sometimes it's in school. What we need to capture and report is how many of our kids are being expelled from our school systems. Not a reflection on the services you guys are providing, but again, a reflection of what's happening to the kids within our system. Of how are they being treated in school. Because I'm biased, I'm an advocate. If we don't have that child in school, we know we're going to get some mischief. I know I did. I didn't have structure and that continuum, that consistency. I was doing something stupid. I'm 50, I still do something stupid if there's not structure. But we need to help capture that. But expulsion is that you're kicked out of school and you got to get permission to re-enter school. And it's usually at the beginning of the next school year. Correctional institution, that includes our dear friends, the DYS residential operations. Department of Corrections is the most common that we think of when we think of correctional institutions. There's also the regional punishment facilities in the Miller County area. But a correctional institution is where that youth's freedom is restricted by hardware. They're not able to leave until someone unlocks that gate, unlocks that door, the court grants permission, DYS grants release, that their liberty is completely restricted. On one of the sections, it's asking about adult criminal involvement. So that what we want to capture is hopefully kids are not moving further or deeper into the system. The goal for all of our children is for them to move away from the need for services, to internalize their capacity to control their own destiny. But sometimes the kids we serve, they either receive services, continue on their life of crime, and end up in the adult criminal justice system. And that's the intent to capture on the form of that progression. Our state's moving toward all district courts. There's some communities that still have municipal courts, district courts, and then criminal division of circuit court. You can still be 14 and charged as an adult in criminal division, but that's what we intend on the form is you're charged as an adult. I'm not interested in whether you're found guilty, whether you've been charged, and that you're categorized, classified as an adult. We've already discussed this, the difference between major, minor conflict. Major is going to require some external intervention, whether it's God Almighty, Madeline Keith. It's going to require some assistance by some external agency to help resolve that conflict. Minimal, natural, normal behaviors. We have families, we have kids that bust. We're aware of that, but it's eventually going to resolve. That they're learning skills, they're learning the ability to deal with that internally within using their own resources that you help equip them with. But that's going to resolve. That's fairly natural. Not going to require court referral. It's not going to require additional services through your agency. But that's eventually, that tempest will eventually resolve. So the 6-month follow-up, if the intent is you're going to do intake, and Otis, to your point, it's about using a calendar, not anything else that we do or what the court does or what DYS does, but using a calendar. So from intake, then it's 6 months, and then 6 months, and we're going to get into that. But part of the challenge is that Melissa and Madeline and Carmen have already discussed, is that in its original format, once a kid got committed to DYS, then that was it, that their fate was determined and the right track never changed that. And so that what we've already discussed is that if your agency is already providing services on a non-custody basis, during the course of that, the kid gets committed, then you do discharge, and then when they come back, and that's when that 6-month period begins. This is the booger bear. We know this is a challenge. We know this is a problem. We know it's going to create some heartache. It's going to create some challenges. The 6 months after the case is closed, 6 months after discharge, the intent, the purpose, the hope, the goal is that as a result of our services, the result of our embracing this child, his or her family, that they're doing better. And to be able to determine that is that 6 months after the case is closed, after you're no longer providing services, some way, somehow, find that kid, find that family, and provide that form and report it to DYS. We know it's going to be hard. We know in some cases it's going to be impossible. We know that. But it would be grand. Whatever, as Carmen says, any data is great. Because to be able to report back, hey, we found this kid. Kid's doing great. Kid's in college. Kid's now a nurse. Those types of issues go miles. Miles. But the intent is, you terminate the case, case is closed, kid's not returned for services. 6 months after that, Melissa and her successor hopefully will be able to trigger a report saying, can you go out and chase that down?
Scott,
Yeah.
I know this is a wish, but it would be great if we could feel for the town to be out there looking for these kids that's no longer in the case.
That's a common question.
Common.
Billing's not an
Well,
issue
it's not
now
an
because
issue.
you're not paid by the
Right.
units you
But
provide.
if you got a worker that spends a whole afternoon chasing down people and you have no way to account for it.
Well, we still document it in the
Yeah.
case file,
Counted
and we
as
keep
a-
track of the
Yeah.
services that each individual
You can.
worker provides, even though it's not entered in the right track. I mean, our workers internally still get credit for the time they spend doing something that is not entered in the right track.
And also salary too, but I would want
Sure.
somebody higher up the ladder to know how much time it takes to do all
Yeah.
Right,
And-
and
and-
you
and
should
I
have
think-
a way to turn that in internally. And back when we did bill, and that's how we got our reimbursement, that was a major problem.
Absolutely.
because, You know, you did.
Well,
Now it's not.
and I get a chance to work from the ideal, and I'm very blessed and very fortunate to do that. That the last thing that we need to do is to create hardships for your agencies and your workers. That we want to make this as simple as possible, and that there's going to be ongoing feedback on this is working, this is not working. This form is likely going to be tweaked again, likely, based on the feedback that you guys provide in your experience as being field tested. But getting feedback on, hey, this is really a hardship, and that we need to find some ways to help resolve that on both individual and state level. On the form originating delinquent offense, that several of you can refer to your agency through the court because they have been either charged with a delinquency, and so that becomes at intake, there is a delinquency. 6 months down, or 6 months down the road, there's been no new offenses, then they go all the way to level 6 from level 4. That's interesting. I like that. We've already discussed this, that the category 4, that if the kid during the course of his or her experience with their agency, if they are violating conditions of probation, or that they are violating their conditions of supervision through offense, they have to go back to court to answer for that, and they get a 4. So that not necessarily a new offense, but they're having to go back and answer to an infraction. That they've done something that the court is going to say, what's up? Not necessarily that they're going to be detained or committed to DYS or face further sanctions, but that they violated some rules. And again, I get to work from the ideal. The purpose of this is not to judge the efficacy of your agency. It's not to say this service works, this doesn't work. It's more about capturing what's happening on behalf of these kids? We're never going to be able to point to this program that UFS is doing in Jefferson County made this difference with this child. It's actually a whole continuum. And so what we're trying to capture is how's this child and his family moving through the system? Are they requiring additional services? Are they dropping off the face of the earth? Or are they resolving these issues? Everyone knows what traffic violation is. I haven't heard one in years. But that it's important for us to capture. If we've got some kids that are going out and rednecking and getting involved, that it's gaining the attention of law enforcement. They're getting a citation. That's also going to be a challenge for some of your agencies to capture. We're not going to do it at data sharing. Some of that will be self-report. I got a ticket, or your worker's going to recognize that they got to go talk to the district court about speeding. Terminated employment, voluntary or involuntarily. And this is going to be our older kids. And unfortunately, in many sections of our state, gaining employment is a challenge not only for our kids, but also for our parents. But that if a youth has gained employment that's age appropriate and they've been fired, we want to capture that. Also, kids that are old enough and should be seeking employment, whether they're doing that or not. Again, not a reflection of what your agency does or doesn't do, but what's happening on behalf of that kid. How motivated is he or she to work toward gaining some independence and a foothold in life? Unemployed, ain't working, not paying Social Security, so Melissa Nichols can never ever retire. We've already discussed validity factors. Very simply, A, it's objective. You can back it up, you can prove it. That if someone comes, either an auditor or the court's going, hey, how did you check this? That, to Carmen's point, it's important to be able to back that up. There are a lot of issues that are going to be subjective, particularly on some self-reports on, I've really got a problem with drugs, unless that you're providing direct services. But that in terms of providing some statistical analysis, that distinction was brought in to be able to identify, we're absolutely for sure that this check number 4, we can back that up, we can prove it, that's valid. And so if we can't back it up, we can't prove it, then for some external bodies going, you know, your data is whack because some of this is valid and some of that's invalid. So we're trying to capture those pieces. Can we prove it? Do we know for a fact that this kid is in school? Do we know for a fact this kid's employed? Do we know for a fact that this kid's passing drug screens? And so Carmen set the standard going, you're going to be in a court of law, can you swear? Then that's kind of the standard. There are a lot of issues that we're going to be, I'm not so sure. I'm getting some conflicting reports, and so it's always important, in my view, to err on the side of caution. You're not going to say, I can back it up, and then later on, no, you can't. And those are DYS terms, event and interval. Event, that triggers you to do the intake. The interval that we put into this piece is 6 months. In its original incarnation, I think it was like every other day you had to fill it out. 6-month intervals. And we're looking at calendars. And then Melissa's going to fix it so we get some prompts. Here's some kids that you need to, here's the 6-month interval. But those are the intervals. The event, you're going to have to get in the right track, send Melissa a love note going, hey, we're entering this kid into your system. And then 6 months. Check me out. It was quicker. But Madeline has provided in your instruction all those definitions. But again, as we walk through this, that there's always going to be questions.
Yes.
Always there are going to be questions. And that there are no such thing as a dumb question, because if you're thinking it, there's someone else too. And so the issue is for all of us to be on the same page. So as we define and move forward, the feedback that you provide is essential and critical.
It's 12:25, we want to take 30 minutes to lunch, or do we need an hour?
Where can they, see, I don't know this area, so tell them what.
Suggestions.
Yeah.
If you go down 7th Street, which is running this side of the building, go down 7th Street to Broadway, that'll put you out in the middle of a bunch of, there's fast food, there's Jimmy John's, there's Starbucks, that's kind of the food hub in downtown. There are some other places, but if you want kind of